Good morning. Yeah, we are counting down to Election Day at this point now. Hard to believe, a little over 2 weeks away till Election Day. It's flying along. As we have been here this morning, we've been talking with different candidates throughout the election cycle. Pleased to be joined this morning by Chellie Pingree. She, of course, is the 1st District representative for Maine's 1st District and has been for 8 terms now, seeking her 9th. And good morning. Great to have you here,
Thanks so much.
Pingree.
Thank you.
Speaking of how long you've been there, I think people forget you were actually the first woman ever elected to the 1st District of Maine.
I know.
And I think it's been a while that people sort of forget that fact, but it's worth noting.
Absolutely. And since then, we've had a woman governor, and so I think that's made the state feel like it's, getting on the right track here. But I've been very pleased to be the representative to this district.
And obviously, if you listen to the pundits, and I think a lot of pundits do sort of listen to this in this case, your race is not perceived to be particularly competitive based on the dollars, based on the polling, based on everything that people are saying. How do you, though, as a candidate, view it? What is your sort of elevator speech to the people of Maine and the 1st District?
Well, you can never take it for granted. And so we're out there working. And the way we look at it, in the House of Representatives, you run for re-election every 2 years. So I don't think about it like the last month of a campaign. I think every 2 years I got to do everything I can during that time period to make sure that we're letting the voters know the issues we're working on, that we're hearing from them, we get a lot of correspondence from the voters, and that we're responding to them about where we stand on issues and the things that we're doing. I mean, the way I look at it, I've been very privileged to have this job. I'd like to go back and work again. It's still a very challenging time for our country. Some of the issues that we're facing internationally, domestically, here in Maine, we hear so much about the cost of housing, cost of food, the cost of childcare. There's a lot of issues to work on right now, and there's a lot I've been working on over time. We're just trying to finish up the farm bill. We work on fisheries issues, things related to the forestry industry here. So there's a lot of work to do, and I'm hoping the voters give me a chance to return.
And again, you mentioned housing. It seems to me that in federal races past, we haven't heard housing sort of percolate up to be one of the top issues for voters. This cycle, it does appear to be the case. What are you telling voters? Again, there's a lot of money already out there through, for example, different types of loan subsidy program. Subsidy may be the wrong word, but different programs that are out there to help people. I know there's a $25,000 plan that Kamala Harris has floated as well. Where do you stand on particularly that plan and on housing in general? What can be done at the federal level?
Housing has been an issue for us in Maine for a little while, and I'm really pleased in a way to see the federal response to it. Many of my colleagues around the country are now starting to have the same experience that we are. Now, I don't mean I'm pleased and I'm glad that everybody has a housing crisis, but it's taken a long time for Congress to understand that this is a serious issue. We've still had some problems with getting sufficient funding, and Maine itself has got some shortfalls in some of the housing programs because the Maine state system is really trying to make more of a push. But there's a lot more we can do through HUD funding, both in rental assistance and also low-cost housing. More that happens through the USDA, and actually some of that actually happens through the Farm Bill. In our appropriations process, and there are tax credits. One of the things that we know going on now in Maine is low inventory. We need about 80,000 houses by 2030. We've had a supply chain shortage, we have a worker shortage, we're not building them as fast as we should be. So support from the federal government could go a long way in pushing that ahead.
How about, you mentioned the cost of food a moment ago as well. Obviously you're hearing it from everybody, just how expensive things are right now. I think it costs $1.22 to buy what you could get for $1 4 years ago. What can you do? I mean, I think there's a lot of, for example, people saying that this inflationary pressure has been government driven, that a lot of the stimulus that was spent during the COVID crisis, while it certainly helped to be buoyant on the economy, was inflationary, and a lot of people are very upset that the fact that there is a lot of inflation out there. How do you respond to those who criticize Congress for spending too much?
Sure, there were a lot of difficult decisions that had to be made, and it's hard to think back during the pandemic when we had, businesses shutting down, tourism not coming to our state. We had to do a lot to shore up the businesses in our state, and we are still recovering from some of that, the supply chain shortages, and it's played out in a lot of things like the cost of housing and like the cost of food. So now we're trying to work on the other side. I think inflation is coming down, but of course it never happens as fast as people want. Interest rates are coming down, also an important part of this. But we're doing a lot at the federal level to try to develop more in the supply chain, even in the state of Maine, to make more locally grown food available. All the way down to the level of supplying more slaughterhouses so that people can process locally grown food. There's also a lot going on at the Justice Department on price fixing. We know there's price fixing going on in the meat industry. A lot of consolidation happened during the pandemic and before, and that's hurt competition. So there are a lot of ways we're going at it, and it is a real crisis for people. We just want to get it to the other side.
Is there, you mentioned foreign policy as well, I think a moment ago too, as one of the issues that obviously you have to grapple with. There's concern right now that the U.S. is maybe overextended with what's happening in Israel, the concern of what's happening with the perhaps a broadening war in the Middle East, and of course the ongoing war in Ukraine, and concerns about containing China. Where do you stand on that? Are we overextended right now?
Well, I mean, we wish we weren't in the situation that we're in. We wish that Russia hadn't invaded the Ukraine. And actually, that was another thing that added to inflation. So much of our energy supply internationally, not for us, came from Russia, and a lot of food came from Ukraine. So those things have added to the pressure, too. I don't think we can pull out of that, and I don't think we can pull back, because if we do, you're going to find Russia moving into other NATO countries, and then we're going to be involved in a much bigger scale. I do think it's time to pull back in Israel. I'm concerned that there hasn't been a ceasefire, that we haven't gotten the hostages out. And we have a lot of leverage there because we are arms suppliers to Israel. And I think now is the time to say we're going to pull back on this. But, you know, the crisis in China, building up the Navy, there's just a lot of issues going around everywhere in the world. And I don't think we can pull back everywhere, but we do have to find sort of that delicate balance.
I think we also, it's interesting, 8 terms you're seeking at your 9th. Is part of your pitch the fact that you do have building seniority now, which does have currency in Washington?
You know, that's a big part of Washington. I mean, first, it takes you a while to understand the job and know how to be good at it, whether it's helping your constituents back in the district with their issues on benefits or other programs that they have to deal with, but also on committees. I'm on the Appropriations Committee now. I'm a subcommittee ranking member or chair when we're in the majority. That gives you a lot more ability to bring back funds to Maine for everything from, you know, communities that have to build new sewer projects or water projects or funding for our schools, whatever it is. That's a big part of the job. So seniority matters a lot, and I've been there a while, and I've learned a lot, and I have a lot of experience of what we do.
And with the seconds we have left, is there any message that you really want to try and get across to voters who may be undecided? Assuming there may be a few out there, there's got to be a few.
Absolutely. Well, I try to keep my focus on the common sense issues that really impact Maine, and we talked about some of those extreme costs, things like childcare that people are really struggling with every day, and also making sure we've got an eye on climate change. You know, Maine is a very impacted state. We saw it in the January storms. We need help both dealing with what happened during those storms in our working waterfronts, but we also have to start preparing for the future, and that's an important part of what we do.
All right, Congressman Chellie Pingree, thanks so much for coming and joining us this morning.
Thank you.